Good evening, everyone. I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you fall asleep with these horror stories from the deep web. So before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. I'd love to know where you're from and what time you're watching this, so leave it in the comments. When you're ready, get comfortable and relax. Let me tell you a story. I was a senior in high school, and let's face it, I wasn't the most popular kid in the place. Me and my friends were those weirdos who hung around alienated and talking about things most people didn't understand. They were precisely the ones who told me about the deep web, that corner of the internet where you can be invisible and do whatever comes to mind, to quote their words. And obviously, that intrigued me. My friends use the deep web only to buy things you can't get in the regular market. Drugs, stolen items from collectors, pirated programs, series and movies and things like that. But I wanted something more. When they mentioned the subject to me, I started researching and came across a lot of disturbing stories of things I would never have imagined could be found on the internet. So now I was curious to know all the dark secrets of the deep web. Among the stories I found, there was talk of strange sites, fetishes, buying and selling organs, and even assassination contractors. Obviously, I had no intention of participating in any of that, but the idea of peering into an occult underworld thrilled me. To me, it sounded like opening the door to a new reality. The routine of my daily life was deadly. Always waking up at the same time, boring classes, same people, then home, video games, homework, sleep, and repeat that cycle. Did anyone else have this happen to them? I thought this was a great opportunity to see what was beyond this monotony. So after many warnings about hackers and scary stuff, I decided it was time to explore the dark abyss of the deep web. It had been almost a week since I learned about the existence of the deep web. When I finally decided to enter, I already knew what I was supposed to do, so logging in was a piece of cake. I was very excited. I imagined I would see some creepy stuff, but I only found sites about drugs and conspiracy theories that didn't interest me at all. I didn't even do drugs or care about that government gossip, so I was pretty disappointed. However, my desire to find all those things I had heard about on the dark web kept me searching. Finally, I came to a site that had no name, but it caught my attention. At first, I thought it was a broken link because I only saw a black screen, but then a chat box popped up with someone calling himself the administrator. He wrote to me, "Congratulations, you found the worst place on the net." I stared at the screen, confused rather than scared, and after a while I only managed to reply, "Great," because what else could I say? I wasn't there for small talk with any strangers, so I just asked him what was good about the site, but he didn't answer. Immediately, horror scenarios began to flood my mind, but there was no turning back now. I needed to know what was on that site, so I typed again, albeit with a bit of fear. But instantly, the chat box closed, and I was sent to a new screen. Suddenly, I found myself watching a video, and noticed that there were 5 other people in a chat next to it. They were all waiting for something exciting. The video was in black and white and showed a small room with only a wooden chair in the center. After a while, the door opened and a guy was pushed inside. The man was blindfolded and wearing only a pair of black boxer shorts, and behind him came a woman dressed in black, her face covered by a mask. The atmosphere was gloomy, and there was a lot of tension. As for me, my adrenaline was through the roof. I was full of anticipation. What would happen now? I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. That sense of morbidity and curiosity had me gripped. I still didn't know if I was ready for what was about to happen. But I was there on the edge of the abyss, eager to find out what else was in this dark world. Deep down, it was a dangerous game. But my fascination was stronger than my fear, and the night was just beginning. Still, I felt I had crossed a boundary I could never cross again. Suddenly, the woman pulled out a knife and cut the guy's blindfold, pushing him towards a chair. He didn't resist, and when his eyes were exposed, I understood why. It looked like he had been drugged, as if he couldn't do anything. On the one hand, I knew this was wrong and my conscience screamed that I should call someone or run away. But there I was, trapped by the image, unable to look away, and expectant of what would happen next. At that moment, the woman approached the camera and held the knife to the guy's throat. As the woman stood in front of the camera, one of the guys in the chat room typed, "Cut her finger off." My jaw dropped and my hands balled into fists. Was he serious? Was I going to witness this being done to a guy while a bunch of sickos rejoiced? A feeling of nausea washed over me, especially when I saw the woman nod her head. Then she grabbed the man's hand and with a precise movement cut off one of his fingers. Blood spurted from the wound, and although the guy groaned, he couldn't fight back. I was completely perplexed. I was shaking as I swung the cursor to the X, because this was really getting the better of me. But I fought the urge to get out of there. It was strange. One part of me was horrified, but the other was fascinated and dead curious as to what it would all end up in. The woman continued with her task. She seemed to enjoy the show. The chat was full of comments from people asking for more, suggesting new tortures, and at that moment I felt a knot in my stomach. I really felt sorry for the poor man. The woman cut off each finger on his hand, taking her time between each one. Then she severed his wrists and then his forearms. All this while he was alive and conscious, but incapable of anything because of whatever it was they administered. However, to my complete horror, the panic and revulsion I felt at first began to transform into a kind of pleasure, an adrenaline rush. I saw him fall to the ground, covered in blood, with both arms missing and his legs cut off up to his knees, and after that, the chat room erupted with euphoria. People were excitedly writing messages of excitement, making suggestions, and asking for more shows like that. Incredibly, I got sucked into the situation. This was more intense than any video game I had ever played or any boring class I'd ever been in. I thought, this is what I wanted. This is the darkness I was looking for. This is the real thing. From that very moment, I decided I had to be a part of this, so I typed in the chat, "End it." In that instant, she smiled one last time and with a slow, calculated movement, dragged her knife across the man's throat. Blood spurted out, a macabre spectacle that left the guy inert. People in the chat room celebrated, congratulating the torturer and commenting on how exciting the event had been, even starting to plan the next screening. Then the woman walked away, leaving the body behind as if it were nothing, just a dummy to play with and have fun with. I was mesmerized, so I quickly wrote down the date for the next event. I knew this was now going to be part of my life. I was about to be part of something much bigger, something exciting, something outside of all rules and morality. I had discovered a great new passion, the deep web. Now in college, I'm even deeper into this world. I have seen things that would make most of you shudder. The routine of my life was broken in a way I never imagined, and now I feel inspired, like a high school student who managed to escape boredom and found his dark purpose. In a place where most see fear, I see excitement, and I can never get enough. On the contrary, every day I feel more alive in this abyss of secrets and dangers that is the deep web. Let me tell you a horror story that is completely true and that, frankly, I consider one of the worst mistakes of my life. Take my advice. Stay away from the deep web and the dark web. Both places are creepy and cruel. For you to understand why I say this, I need to give you a little context. During my first semester in college, I broke up with my first girlfriend. We had been in a serious relationship since high school and were inseparable. So much so that in 6 years of a relationship, we only had one small fight. But it all fell apart when she moved to another state with her family. I still can't believe it happened. As you can imagine, the next few months were a real emotional chaos for me. I would attend classes, come home, do homework, and then barricade myself in my room crying nonstop. I felt trapped in a loop with no way out, certain that I would never see her again, at least not anytime soon. However, as is often the case, I eventually came out of that horrible depression. I began to socialize more with friends and leave the sadness behind, but there were days when the memories would hit me hard. One day, I came home feeling especially depressed after a group of friends mentioned my ex. I needed a distraction, so I decided to chat online and forget about her for a while, which is how I ended up on Reddit, looking for any content that would make me laugh or entertain me in some way. But I didn't find anything that worked for me. However, one post caught my attention. It talked about something called the deep web. I was immediately curious, so I clicked on it. The post promised some crazy stuff about the deep web, some of which sounded too extreme to be true. It said there were sites to get drugs, contract killers, weird fetishes, and even human trafficking, as well as secret government documents. I wasn't interested in fetishes or anything illegal, but I wanted to see what that part of the internet I knew absolutely nothing about was really about. Most people said I needed a special browser called Tor, so I got up the courage and decided to install it. In the end, all I wanted was to clear my mind and stop thinking about Kayla. I must say I'm a bit of a geek and knew how to do these things, so after a few clicks I had Tor installed and ready to go. Upon logging in, I came across something called the Hidden Wiki and other sections on state secrets, conspiracy theories, and stuff. Nothing really sounded too scary at the time, so I started exploring the categories they offered: drugs, adult content, pornography, and more. Clicking on drugs, I was surprised to see at least 100 related sites. I wasn't looking to buy anything. It wasn't my style to get involved in legal trouble, but my curiosity was piqued. This was a new world and I wanted to know more. My search didn't stop there. I moved on, and among several things I saw, I came across forums discussing torture and illegal pornography. At that moment, reality hit me. Maybe the publication wasn't so wrong and everything I had heard about the deep web was being revealed before my eyes, and I must say that this place was much scarier than I imagined. My curiosity grew, but at the same time a shiver ran down my spine as I thought, what was I exposing myself to? It was like uncovering a box of horrifying surprises, and the worst part was that I wanted to keep looking. Even though I knew this was all sick and dangerous, something inside me urged me to keep investigating. I knew I was getting into territory that would probably change my life forever, and even though my gut was screaming for me to stop, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to keep digging. Finally, I found a list of links that had nothing to do with the sites I knew, those typical .com or on net. These were crazy codes of letters and numbers ending in onion, and of course this intrigued me immediately. I jumped right in and clicked on one of these links, and to be honest, I thought it was just a hoax because the page took a while to load. But when it finally did, I was confronted with a red link and a smiley face looking at me in a creepy way. At that instant, the alarms in my head went off, but my curiosity got the better of me and I decided to click again. You might think what I saw next was a virus or a hack, but no, it was much worse. The site was a dark feast of horror. Photos and videos of people being tortured, raped, and even hung. Some of them weren't even of legal age, and you know what I mean. I've seen some pretty disturbing things before, like grotesque accidents, but this was another dimension of disturbing. I don't consider myself a person who is easily frightened, but this pushed my limits. Especially when I noticed there was a link to a live feed. I know many may think that such things don't really happen, but the stark reality is that there are people on this planet who take pleasure in doing these atrocities and heinous things. Realizing what I was really about to witness, I immediately closed the site and removed the Tor browser from my computer. I really couldn't take that much. In fact, I went for quite some time without logging onto my computer. After doing some more research on the dark web, I discovered that many people said these tortures were just urban legends, but I knew what I had seen, and it was no fairy tale. For those of you who are thinking about venturing into the dark web or the deep web, listen to my advice. Don't do it, and especially not if you don't know what you are doing. I was young, naive, and a bit foolish for getting carried away, but I would have preferred never to have set foot on that ground. So if for some reason you're curious about the dark web, I'll tell you this once and for all. Don't go. It's a journey you don't want to take. There are things in this world that are better left unexplored, and the darkness there is one of them. In my life, I've only had one girl, and let me tell you, I was very surprised, but maybe not like you'd imagine. I've always been a real nerd, and yes, with a capital N. Being the typical nerd of those who loves anime, video games, and everything that keeps me indoors, away from human interaction. Friendship, for me, was something almost unknown. Well, that concept was almost alien to me. My parents used to worry when they saw me locked in my room watching cartoons while outside. The neighborhood kids played and laughed. Sometimes they would look out the window, and I'm sure they wondered what was wrong with their little Miguel, who wouldn't even go out to get a little sun. But over time, they got used to the idea, and well, that was it. Now, I'm self-employed, and surprisingly, I made a friend in an online game. In the end, we got along pretty well, sharing the same interests and chatting every day. To me, that counted as a friendship. I work from home, keeping the same social distance I had as a kid. I'm a programmer, of course, but I don't always design websites. But anyway, back to the story. One day I had to go out to take my clothes to the dry cleaners. So I got in the car, and while waiting at a red light, I was looking for my phone everywhere as usual. And suddenly the car started to move a little from side to side. What the hell? I thought, peeking around the dashboard. To my surprise, I saw a girl lying on the hood, so I set the brake and ran out. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" I asked as I approached, a little confused. Then she looked up and said, "Sorry, I was looking at my phone and didn't see you." At that moment, I was mesmerized. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. Dazzling blue eyes, adorable freckles on her nose and cheeks, and a smile that completely disarmed me. "Are you sure you're okay?" I insisted, still mesmerized by her gaze. "Yes, I'm perfect." "Thank you for your concern," she replied, smiling as she tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. In that instant, I completely forgot my social anxiety, and for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable talking to someone other than my family and asked her out for coffee. To my surprise, she accepted. That afternoon was amazing. It turned out she was also a bit of a nerd, loved the same anime as me, and was an animal lover, even volunteering at a shelter. But there was something else that struck me. Her parents had passed away when she was little. Although I didn't know it at the time, that event left deep imprints on her. As we were talking, the waiter brought a coffee that wasn't the one she had ordered, and she got so nervous that she didn't want to change it. She only wanted a cappuccino, but the waiter brought her a tall Americano. However, instead of demanding that he change her order, the girl immediately blushed, almost wanting to disappear. "God, I hope he doesn't get fired for this," she muttered as she covered her face with her hands. "Don't worry," I said with a laugh. "It's just a mistake. No one's in trouble." I tried to reassure her, but it seemed like every little thing in her life was affecting her intensely. After a few weeks of dating, I was in a pretty deep slump one night, and almost without thinking, I texted Carolina. "Hey, I'm really missing you," I wrote back. She texted me back that she missed seeing me too. Thus began an intense chat that I honestly didn't think I was going to have. At the end of the conversation, I decided to take a chance and asked her to send me some naked pictures. She had a great body, and as her boyfriend, I didn't see why I couldn't ask. Carolina was quite hesitant, but in the end she agreed and sent me about 4 images. A couple of days after that, everything seemed to follow its normal course. She spent the night at my house twice, and on one of those occasions I decided to make her a romantic dinner. I tried to cook chicken, but, as expected, I ended up burning it. So, not to disappoint her, I ordered Chinese food and we settled down on the couch to watch our favorite anime. It was a great night, and I wish it had never ended. After Carolina left, I was home alone and decided to play an online video game that I loved. My gaming buddy Luis was online and greeted me. "How's it going, Miguel?" he asked me with his usual curiosity. He had barely logged in and was already throwing questions at me, and I, distracted as always, responded with a simple, yeah, pretty much fine. But then, without me noticing, he dropped a bombshell on me that would change everything. I know you're not using the dark web anymore, but I still visit it, and I saw some pictures of your girl there, he said with a naturalness that chilled my blood. My heart stopped. What pictures? I asked, disguising the panic that was already starting to take hold of me. And then Luis's words struck like a bolt of lightning. It turns out that the pictures of Carolina he had sent me were circulating on the dark web, and to make matters worse, they were gaining a lot of attention. It was impressive. How was it possible that those private photos were out there, exposed for anyone to see? And worse, I remembered that Carolina was also pretty computer savvy. So if she ever saw those photos, yes, I would be responsible. I couldn't wait. The next thing I did was look for the hacker who had shared these images, because it clearly hadn't been me. I'm kind of good with technology, so I got to work. I was up all night trying to track the guy down until finally, I managed to hack into his computer. But when I tried to delete the photos from his hard drive and the accounts where he had posted them, I got a scary message. Do you really think I'm that stupid? Don't worry, you can keep the photos. I know who you are, Miguel. At that moment, I froze. But the message didn't end there. I know you have computer skills. I'll need you someday, so accept my proposal and I'll take the photos from you. Reply in the chat. I didn't understand what he meant, but I was so scared I couldn't think straight. So I quickly agreed. Okay, just take them down. Right away, he confirmed that the photos would be removed from the dark web. Then I got a message from him. Good talk, see you in the future. I thought Carolina was safe, but in reality, Carolina had already realized that the photos were all over the internet. She called me saying how was I able to do something like that to her when she trusted me. I was crushed and replied that it wasn't like that it was a misunderstanding, but it was obvious that she didn't believe me. After a moment, the photos had been deleted. But even then, it was too late. Carolina did not forgive me, and we never saw each other again. However, I still owed this guy a debt. I didn't know what he wanted from me or when he would need me. I just knew I was on his radar, and that scared me. To this day, I haven't received any instructions from him, and I hope it stays that way. But the worry in my chest won't go away, and I always wonder when he will show up again. Let me tell you about my experience in a place that many consider a myth, but I can confirm that it is real. A place known as the Marianas Web. For those who don't know, this is said to be the shadiest corner of the entire deep web. Many people claim that the Marianas Web is a myth, and that all that stuff about red rooms and torture is not real. But let me tell you, they are dead wrong. I know because I used to be a hacker in those dark recesses. I was so good that I could access files and things that few others had access to. I could hack streetlights, bank accounts, even government documents. It was an intense adrenaline rush, but also a dangerous thing. And I knew it was all bad. But at the time, I thought I was a genius and thought I could get away with it if I was careful. It was the summer of 2015, and one night I decided it was time to explore a part of the internet that most wouldn't even imagine. I researched for days, gathered information, and followed the necessary steps to get to the Marianas website, but I'm not going to give you details on how it's done. I'll just tell you that it has a lot to do with encryption and encryption to access certain places. People think it's easy to access the dark web using just a special browser, but let me tell you that it's much more complicated than it looks. Eventually, I managed to get into this famous Marianas site, and the first things I saw were some drug sites, some sites selling stolen credit cards, and some grotesque fetish sites. Fortunately, those things didn't interest me, so I paid no attention to them. That's when I noticed a message in the upper right-hand corner of my screen that said, "Hello, new user. You have an invitation." I was confused, so I foolishly clicked on the message and a blank screen appeared with a single link. From the format, it looked like it was a video, I wasn't afraid of being hacked because my computer was super protected, and anyone trying to breach it would be in for a surprise. So thinking myself the king of the screen, I decided to click on the link. It took a while to load, but finally a static image was displayed on the screen, accompanied by a strange sound, like a frequency that made your hair stand on end. The video quality was so bad that I could only make out what appeared to be a living room. When a door opened, a man in a terrifying mask appeared and sat in a chair and began to introduce himself. "I am Alpha, known for assassinating many people in many interesting ways." As he talked about his assassination plans, I knew he was in trouble. He began to describe how he decided who he was going to kill and how he always got away with it. I've had quite a bit of experience on the dark web and have encountered some strange things, but this was too much. My heart was pounding so hard and adrenaline was racing through my body. I kept watching, unable to look away, knowing that this did not promise anything good. The situation became more and more terrifying, and I didn't know if there was any way back. After a while watching that strange video, Alpha got up and went to another room, and when he returned, he brought a folder which he opened in front of the camera. Inside the folder were many pictures of his victims, and they were not just ordinary images. They showed people killed in brutal ways, some stabbed, some beaten. One of the photos he showed was particularly gruesome. It showed a woman being run over by a truck. Alpha began to talk about his creative methods of tormenting people, claiming that he liked his deaths to be long and painful. As I was listening, I saw that there was a comment section, and in a moment of madness, I decided to leave a message. I wrote, "You're a sick guy." I thought it would be a way to save myself, as if it would somehow make him feel powerless, but in reality, that turned out to be the biggest mistake I could have made. Within seconds, my screen went dark and a chat box appeared. Inside the box was a message that said I was an idiot for typing that. I thought it might be a bot trying to scare me, but something inside me told me that wasn't a bot. It was a real person. So I wrote, "Who are you?" The answer came back quickly. "I'm Alpha." That made my hair stand on end. On impulse, I told him I was going to report him to the police and show the video. There was a short silence before he replied, "Oh, very well, then I'll have to kill you." In my mind, I thought he was just joking, but I was completely wrong. Then he wrote something that chilled my blood. My full address. That message took my breath away. That was just the beginning. Alpha went on to say that he knew everyone in my life, my parents, friends, even my teachers. I was in complete shock, wondering how the hell he knew so much about me. The last line he wrote was, "See you later." After that, my computer suddenly shut down, and no matter how hard I tried to turn it on, there was no way I could get it to work again. I didn't mention it to my parents because I knew it would get me in a giant mess, so I decided to keep quiet and let it all fade away. A few days went by and I didn't think I was over all of this, but a few weeks later I got home to my mom and she started asking me something weird about a guy who had come to ask about me. She said a strange man had come by the house, and luckily my mom isn't dumb. She told her she had the wrong place. He tried to convince her that she had to come in, but she simply refused, and eventually the guy left. Since then, I've been convinced it was Alpha or someone who was related to him. Fortunately, to this day, this has never happened again. I guess the guy really either stayed convinced that this wasn't my house or just let it go. This was my encounter with the Mariana's Web, a place that makes you realize that a single mistake can ruin your life, and I still wonder what would have happened if my mom hadn't been home that day. Hello, my name is Jamie, and I'm going to tell you about something that will freeze your blood. I work for a company that is dedicated to removing malicious websites. I can't tell you the name, but I've been at this for quite a while. And a couple of years ago, I came across a group of what are known as red rooms, specifically the 5 true red rooms of the deep web. No, don't go searching the web because you're not going to find them. If you try to enter any of those links, you will only get weird viruses on your computer. There are many myths about these rooms, And while some may just be scams, there are others that are creepy and real. To access the real red rooms, you need to know someone who manages them, as you can't just log in through some browser. It's a complicated process, and you have to gain the trust of some of the moderators behind these rooms. I managed to become friends with one of them by chance. The dynamic goes something like this. If you manage to get into the first red room, pay in Bitcoin and prove you are serious, you might get permission to enter the second one, and so on. So here I was, eager and curious, ready to step into the unknown. I clicked to enter the first room, and a black screen popped up, asking me for an access code. There I entered my 4 numbers with a dash, and to my surprise, I was given access. I thought it had been too easy, so I moved on. The screen filled up with black video boxes, some with disturbing titles like "Watch Me Terrorize Maya" or Tiffany. Without thinking, I decided to watch Me Terrorize Kara first. The video started with a guy recording with what appeared to be a phone. He was inside a house, hiding behind a door, and I could see the living room furniture, a leather couch and bookshelves. He was whispering in a language I didn't understand, and suddenly, the doorknob began to turn. I heard the sound of keys, and a girl came in. She was wearing a green nurse's uniform, was small, and looked to be in her early 20s. Suddenly, I heard a man yell, "Don't move." The girl froze like a deer caught in the headlights of a car. I could tell she was very scared. Then she dropped her keys on the ground. And at that instant, a guy dressed completely in black with a ski mask appeared behind her, brandishing a huge hammer. Raising his arm, the guy hit her twice in the head. She fell to the floor, and blood soaked the white carpet. That video was very frightening, realizing that there were many people who loved that kind of morbidity. The most disturbing thing was that the man yelled at the man behind the door, uttered something that sounded like "Don," and to my horror, both cameras went off. Whether this was real or it was the most disturbing sight I had ever seen, I didn't think it could be an act. I wanted to stop watching immediately, but for some reason, I kept feeling the need to watch the next video. When I started the next video, titled "Tiffany Freaks Out," what I saw was even more disturbing. The camera focused on a park, where a woman with brown and blue hair was jogging down a track, very calm, and a guy could be seen following her. He had foreign features and was sitting in a car with a cracked windshield. He was wearing black gloves, though, and never showed his face. He was laughing and mumbling as the woman ran, while I, through the screen, wanted to yell at her to run away from there, to get away from the park, but I knew there was nothing I could do. She couldn't hear me. Suddenly, the screen went dark, and I thought the video was over, but I was very wrong. The guy came back in what appeared to be night vision, all green and a little blurry. Then I saw what the camera was focusing on. A girl tied to a log trying to scream. Her arms and legs were restrained, and her mouth was covered. I realized it was the same girl I had seen jogging in the park, but this time, she wasn't jogging. Then the same hairy-looking man in black appeared again, who appeared to be the same one from the previous video. This time, he was stroking her hair, and the one holding the camera was telling her to calm down in English. She was crying. For me, it was frustrating. I couldn't do anything, and my heart sank as I watched him pull her body out of the trunk of a car. In a moment of clumsiness, he hit her head with the trunk lid, and for a moment I thought it was just a joke and everything was going to be okay, trying to calm down. But I was wrong. It got even more horrible. The man in black tackled the girl to the ground, and she started crying and screaming. Then the camera zoomed in on her face and the lights went out, leaving her shrouded in darkness. In that instant, I felt the world come crashing down on me. She had lost all hope. I wanted to cry, and I struggled to keep the tears at bay. The scariest part was when they started tying her wrist to the car's grill. The cameraman was still filming, and the other guy started the engine, making it clear what they were going to do. They were going to drag her away. At that moment, the video cut off abruptly. At the end, a message appears that made my blood run cold. If you really enjoy my content and want to support me, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That helps me reach more people. That sentence sounded so out of place from what I had seen that I could barely process it. I stood in shock, feeling the gravity of what I had just witnessed crushed me. I immediately left that place and never went back into the dark web again. I remember finally throwing away the used tissues and letting out a heavy sigh. I had had enough of crying over someone who didn't value me. 2 weeks ago, my ex broke up with me, and that still hurt because the truth was that Scott had been the only one I really loved, and the fact that he was now with someone else had left me broken. I was 24 years old, and I thought I was finally finding my way after college. Scott and I used to talk about our dreams for the future, and now that had all vanished like a bad dream. I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts behind me. I couldn't fall back into crying, so I paced around my room for a while, which was a total mess. I lived alone, so there was no one to chat with, and I was getting more and more bored, until my eyes fell on my laptop. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to venture into the dark web, something Scott used to talk about and had always piqued my curiosity, so I turned on the computer and started exploring. The browser was already installed, as Scott used to browse from my computer sometimes, so it was easy to log in. However, as soon as I started browsing, I came across content so weird that it gave me the creeps. When I came to a site that promised to host orgies, I slammed the laptop shut. Never again, I thought. At least for now, my curiosity was satisfied. Nevertheless, that little adventure distracted me, so for a while I stopped thinking about my ex. I didn't want to cry anymore, so I decided to go out to a nice restaurant a short distance away. The decor was beautiful and the food was tasty, and in the end I left a nice tip for the waiter, feeling a little better. When I returned home, my phone buzzed. "How was lunch?" said a message from an unknown number. I pondered, thinking it might be some trap or spam, so I ignored it. The next day, I lay in bed watching a sex education series on Netflix, and just as I finished watching the last episode, my phone rang again. "Hey Dana, what's up?" That familiar voice made my heart race. It was the same number that had asked me about lunch. But that wasn't all. Every time I thought she had calmed down, I got more messages. One night, as I closed the cab door and paid the driver, my phone rang again. How was the ride? In that instant, I felt uncomfortable, as if my privacy had completely vanished. The next message was even weirder and more disturbing. "Colgate is the best toothpaste for you." What the fuck? I muttered, feeling completely confused. The messages I was receiving seemed to invade my life. The next morning, as I was picking out my clothes, I saw another message that said, "You look amazing in that red bra." Then I burst out in frustration, so much so that I took off the bra I was wearing and opted for a black one. How did this person know what I was wearing? I was already starting to feel scared. I had the feeling that someone was stalking me. I constantly wondered how they could possibly know what I was doing or what I was wearing. My skin was crawling just thinking about it. Was I being stalked by some crazy person? That's when I decided that this was way beyond a simple prank. I had to find out who was behind these strange messages. I was on my way to see a private detective, thinking that maybe this could be solved, but that morning I had already received 3 messages from that strange number. The first one said I should eat more than just macaroni and cheese. Seriously. Then shortly after that came another one reminding me to drink more water, because I was dehydrated. What the hell? This guy was completely into my life. And as if that wasn't enough, the third message said, "You look great in red," just as I was getting out of the shower and putting on comfortable clothes. I decided I had to get help, so I went to the appointment with the detective. The guy looked to be about 30 years old, had a big smile and no ring. I told him everything that had been going on, and his expression turned serious. Then he sighed and told me he had an idea of what was going on, but didn't want to rush to conclusions. After that, he followed me home and pulled out a weird device, which seemed to scan my whole place. Each time it beeped, his face became more concerned. In the end, he gave me the bad news. My house was full of micro cameras, and so that person knew every single thing I did. The idea that someone was monitoring my life made my blood run cold, and I even felt dizzy when I learned the chilling truth. I thanked the detective for his work and paid him the money he had promised. But in my mind, I was convinced that it had all started because of the dark web visit. That night, I returned home determined and began packing my things to escape the city the next day. I was not going to let a crazy person play with my head. I had the feeling that this person enjoyed harassing me, and I was not going to allow that. So I decided to change my phone and my laptop, as well as to move to a new place in another city. And from that day on, I promised myself that I would never go back to the dark web. Although I freaked out when I received a message on my new phone shortly after moving, I knew I had done the right thing. Starting over in a different place would be a challenge, but I was determined to make it work. Life had to go on, away from that harassment. I always thought my girlfriend was a real hottie. To be honest, I've never had great self-esteem and often felt like I wasn't on her level. Let me tell you a little about myself. I'm shorter than her, I don't have a six-pack to show off, and besides, she pays the bills. I'm just the receptionist at a hotel on the edge of town. Now let's talk about my girlfriend, Michelle. She's tall, has those green eyes that dazzle you, and dark hair that blows everyone's mind. Whenever we go out, it's impossible not to notice how all the guys stare at her, and some even dare to approach her and ask for her number while I'm standing next to her. Michelle always assures me that I'm the best thing for her and that she loves me. But in recent times, I have felt that things have changed. I find her glued to her phone, smiling or laughing, and when I ask her what she finds so funny, she simply tells me that she is talking to her friends. I don't know, something about her answer doesn't convince me. I'm starting to think she might be cheating on me. Every time I think about it, I shudder, as if it's only a matter of time until she finds someone better than me. One night, while she was sleeping, I heard her phone vibrate. I didn't want to be that jealous, snooping guy, but a voice in my head told me I should see who was texting her. So I slowly got out of bed and walked over to her nightstand. But just as I was about to touch her phone, she woke up and asked, "What are you doing, honey?" I, caught, replied, "Nothing, I was just thinking. Your glass is empty, I want to get you some water." Then she stretched and thanked me in a sleepy voice, so I quickly left. As I filled the glass, I was overcome with paranoia about whether she was really being faithful to me, and that worry led me to my computer. I wanted to find a device to track her, though I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. So I typed, "spy on a cheating girlfriend," into the search engine, but found nothing useful. All that came up were small cameras and unimportant gadgets. So I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went into the deep web. As I logged on, I felt like a psycho boyfriend looking for solutions. Finally, I came to a site where the darkness seemed to come alive, and I found something that caught my attention. A tiny camera that could be clipped to someone's clothes and could record video and audio. I thought it was expensive, but when I saw that it only cost $20 with free shipping, I didn't think twice. What could I lose? So I placed the order and closed my computer, feeling like a real stranger. The next day, I woke up late, and when I looked for my clothes, I noticed that Michelle had left me a note saying she would be late for work. I got a little worried and answered my doubts by looking for my pants, which were nowhere to be found. Later, when I returned home, I found a message that left me a little uneasy. The note said, "I was with friends." I threw it on the table and went straight to the kitchen to pour myself some water. But when I saw a full glass, something strange started to happen. Suddenly, my knees turned to gel and I passed out. When I woke up, I was on the couch, and everything felt strange. I remembered clearly that I was in the kitchen, and as I got up, I started calling, "Michelle, is that you, love?" But the house was silent. I checked my phone for any messages, and indeed I had one that intrigued me. as it ended with a link. Desperately curious but fearful of what I might find, I decided to ignore it. Finally, I called out to her, "Hey love, did you get home?" And her reply came quickly, "Yes." But what followed froze me cold. "Where are you?" When I asked Michelle where she was, she said she was just with some friends having drinks. That answer made me a little nervous, but I wanted to sound controlling. However, I never quite trusted her friends. They always seemed a little like they were looking to do more than gossip. I tried to reassure myself and told her I'd be waiting at home. "I don't think we'll be long," she replied. But something in his tone sounded odd, as if he had an issue on his mind that he didn't want to share. When he left, I felt uneasy, but instead of letting the anxiety consume me, I decided to distract myself. I was in the living room when I suddenly received a disturbing message that said, "Don't let them hurt you." I froze. Who the hell was sending me that? It was as if someone was aware of what was going on, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. Then I realized I had a live video feed coming from my living room. What the hell? I jumped up to look. It was my own house. My heart started pounding as I wondered if this was all a joke. I wanted to text the person who was doing it, but the number was unknown. Instead, my phone vibrated again. This time I read a message that surprised me. "Don't bother trying to reach me, you can't do anything. You can only talk and I will listen to you." I felt a shiver run down my back. What the hell did that mean? The conversation in my mind was going a mile a minute. "Why did you do this? What do you want from me?" I asked out loud even though I was alone in the house. The answer came quickly. "You're so naive. Sure, there's a camera, a cheap one, but with impressive technology, so if you don't want it to ruin your life, you must be willing to pay. And don't even think about blinking when you enter your password, because I'll see everything." Helplessness filled me with despair. I couldn't believe I was being blackmailed. I sat on the couch, unable to stop thinking about how I had gotten to this point, but I knew I couldn't talk. I didn't want the guy to hear me. It was at that moment that Michelle came home, and I could tell she had had a couple of drinks. She approached me, but I dismissed her. "I'm tired, love. Not tonight," I told her. She got upset and went upstairs, and even then, I knew the guy was watching everything. The next few days were chaos. Michelle and I couldn't be together like we used to. My mind was always on the camera and the threats, and I couldn't concentrate on work, so I almost got fired. That mental pressure became unbearable, and every message from the guy increased my anxiety. He seemed to be controlling every aspect of my life, and that made me depressed. One night, after a couple of drinks, I made a decision that would change everything. I drove to a nearby bridge, determined to end the suffering. And as I looked out, I felt like it was all over. But just then, my phone began to vibrate. Someone was calling. I thought for sure it was the man who had ruined my life, but I was wrong. It was an unknown number, so I answered it. "Hello, this is Mason," said a calm voice. "I'm happy you're still alive." Caught in confusion, I asked if we knew each other. "No, but I think we're both in the same boat," he continued. "If you have an implanted camera, you probably placed an order for what is now haunting you." The conversation got weird. Mason explained that he had used the same type of camera and that, like me, he had fallen victim to a guy who was stalking our data. "I had to hack into a database to get your number. I called over 20 people today, but they all killed themselves. You're the only one who answered." My stomach churned. This guy was not just a stranger, but someone who had gone through the same experience as me. The man told me about a plan to track down the person responsible, and to do that he needed me to give him access to my bank details. "If you give him your details, that's where a tracker can be placed," he explained. I didn't understand everything, but I did know one thing. I wanted to regain control over my life. "Okay, I'll do it," I replied, feeling more determined than ever to reveal the truth behind this nightmare. I don't know how, but after talking to Mason, A smile emerged on my face, something I hadn't felt in weeks. I went straight home, excited and anxious. I had to face Michelle. As I walked in, I saw her sitting on the couch with a pained expression. It was obvious she had been in pain, so I reached over, hugged her, and told her everything was going to be okay, but she wouldn't even look at me. It was as if we were strangers already. I knew my behavior hurt her and I didn't want to lose her, so I decided to act. I went to my room and pulled out my credit card. I made it look like I was entering my details on a website. As part of the plan, I had agreed with Mason. Within minutes, I received a message from the guy who had implanted the camera in me. "Don't bother calling the bank. Soon all your money will be transferred to my account. It's been a pleasure doing business with you," it said. My stomach cringed. How could he do that? I tried not to respond, but something inside me feared I had been duped. A few moments passed, and just as I was about to panic, my phone rang. It was Mason, and he told me he was only half an hour away. "I'm coming to pick you up," he told me. "Make sure you close one eye on your way out and bring something to cover your implanted eye. I'm bringing an iPad so we can talk by typing," he specified. It was like a race against time, and I was ready for it all to be over. I went downstairs with the intention of letting Michelle know I was coming out, but I saw she wasn't there. A moment later, I heard a car honk outside. It was Mason, so I quickly got into the car, and to my surprise, he didn't look like the dangerous guy I had imagined. He wasn't a thug, just a regular guy, although in the back seat he was carrying 2 guns. "One is for you at the end. Make sure you comply," he wrote on the iPad. We arrived at a house that felt a little out of the ordinary, and Mason opened the door with ease as if he was used to it by now. The lights were off, and here the atmosphere was eerie. We headed upstairs, and when we stepped on the first step, it creaked ominously. Then we heard a voice coming from a bedroom, but it wasn't a normal voice. It was coming from a speaker in the room. And immediately, Mason became alert. In an instant, a figure leaned out of the bedroom window. "Come on, Mason," I shouted as we ran into the room. When we entered, we were surprised to see a boy, no more than a teenager. Mason caught him before he could escape and pushed him against the wall. The boy, who was clearly terrified, covered his face with his hands. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it," he said as tears welled up in his eyes. Mason held him firmly and demanded answers, and the boy trembled as he explained that there was a doctor involved in creating the implants, someone who had been reaping money through blackmail. His words led us to the next step. We had to find that doctor, who turned out to be a cousin of the boy. We got in the car, our new target clear. When we finally arrived at the doctor's house, the tension was palpable. Mason didn't hesitate to go inside, determined to take justice into his own hands. The surgery went quickly, and after a while we found ourselves back at my house, feeling liberated from those suffocating chambers. I quickly returned home with overwhelming relief, feeling like I could resume my life, but when I walked in, something wasn't right. There was no sign of Michelle. I called her name, but she didn't answer, and instantly the phone rang. It was a guy, and his voice sounded cold. "She's busy." "Where's Michelle?" I asked with a lump in my throat. She seems to be at a party," he said, and at that moment I heard her laughing in the background. "Looks like this whole thing between you two is over," she continued proudly. Then he hung up before I could complain. As we climbed the stairs, everything became clear. Michelle's room was empty, and in its place was a note. "I'm sick of feeling like you don't care about me. I'm moving into Anna's until I find a place. This is the end, Michelle." I read those words and felt everything crumble around me. She was gone, and even though I was free from the torment of the camera, it felt like I had lost something much more valuable. In the end, it had all been for nothing, and now I was left with the burden of rebuilding my life without her.